My name is Zoe. I'm 31 years old. The first sound was my own chair scraping back across the hardwood. Sharp, forced, familiar. I had taken maybe 3 bites of roast chicken. 3. The skin was still crisp. The center was still hot. Butter from the rolls had melted into the edge of my mashed potatoes. Sweet iced tea sweated in my glass. Black pepper gravy sat thick in the bowl between my father and my brother. Green beans with bacon were still steaming in the serving dish because my mother only made them when she wanted the table to look like the kind of home people complimented at church. Then she looked at my plate, then past me, like I was already finished. "Get up and start clearing," she said. "Everything's drying on the plates." My father kept cutting his meat. My brother reached for another roll, and nobody moved except me. I looked down at my food. Still mine. Still warm. "I'm still eating," I said. My mother tapped one fingernail against the rim of her glass. A tiny sound. Precise. Annoyed. "And we're still sitting here with the kitchen waiting," she said. "Go." That was the system in my parents' house. Not a random bad night. Not a misunderstanding. Not one of those family stories people tell later with a laugh and call old-fashioned. A system. I stood because standing up was easier than becoming the problem. That is another thing I learned early. In some houses, fairness is disruptive. In some houses, hunger is less offensive than resistance. My chair dragged back. My plate stayed where it was. I carried everyone else's empty dishes to the sink while they kept eating behind me. But steam rose off the dishwater and hit my face before dinner was even over. Forks scraped, ice clinked. My father asked Tyler something about the Browns. Tyler laughed with his mouth half full. And I stood there rinsing gravy off my father's plate like hired help in the home I grew up in. By the time I came back to the table, my chicken was cooling under the light. My mother had set a stack of folded napkins partly over my plate, like the space belonged to the house more than it belonged to me. Dad glanced up once. "Wipe the counter while you're up." Tyler didn't even look embarrassed. He just said, "Can you bring the hot sauce too?" There are humiliations that arrive loud. A slammed door, a shouted insult, a public scene. So then there are the humiliations that settle into ordinary life so completely they start wearing the face of routine. Mine lived in dinner, Sunday meals after church, football Sundays with chili in the crock pot, summer cookouts with paper plates and citronella candles, Thanksgiving mornings when my mother lined up serving bowls like she was styling a catalog spread and handed me a sponge before I had even had breakfast. Christmas dinners with red lights glowing in the front window while Tyler opened gifts first, and I carried trays with potholders digging into my palms. My parents were not the kind of cruel people strangers notice right away. That made it worse. To neighbors, we looked solid, normal, reliable. A middle-class family in a clean subdivision outside Columbus, Ohio, trimmed hedges, white blinds. An American flag clipped to the porch. A wooden sign in the kitchen that said, "Gather like the word itself could bless a room." My father managed regional warehouse accounts for a building supply company and came home smelling faintly of printer toner, coffee, and outside air. My mother worked part-time at a dental office and wore pressed cardigans even on weekends. She kept her nails short, her house clean, and her smile ready for other people. We looked like the kind of family that sent thank you notes, the kind that brought casseroles when someone had surgery, the kind that nodded in the right places during church and got described as good people. Maybe they were, in pieces. But gathering is not the same as belonging. That took me years to understand. In our house, Tyler belonged. I was useful. There is a difference between being needed and being valued. I learned that difference with a sponge in one hand and hunger still sitting in my stomach. When I was 12, my mother started calling me her good helper. At first, I thought that meant trusted. It did not. It meant available. It meant I knew where the casserole lids went. It meant I knew how my father liked his coffee when he worked Saturdays. It meant I checked the burger buns before guests arrived. It meant I noticed when there weren't enough paper towels in the downstairs bathroom before church ladies came over. It meant if Tyler forgot to take out the trash, I got told to do it because I had noticed it first. If he kicked off muddy cleats by the back door, I was the one wiping the tile because I was standing there already. If guests needed more chairs, and I got sent to the garage. If dessert plates ran low, I was the one washing them fast. Every rule in that house leaned downhill toward me. Tyler was 2 years older. Loud in the easy way boys get rewarded for. Tall early, handsome early, confident early. My mother liked to say he had presence. My father called it leadership. Teachers used words like charismatic when his grades dipped. Coaches called him competitive when he shoved people too hard. Church members called him promising. I called him what he actually was, protected. He was allowed to stay seated until he was full. That sounds small when I say it fast. It was never small. It meant something every single time. At 13, I carried plates to the sink while Tyler leaned back laughing with Dad over a Browns game. At 14, and I missed the warm center of every biscuit on Thanksgiving because my mother liked the dishes washed before dessert. At 15, I stood at the counter eating cold macaroni beside the drying rack while Tyler got second helpings and a conversation about scholarships like his future was a family investment. Mine was treated like a practical concern, something to be managed, something I would figure out. I did try asking once, really asking, not sulking, not muttering, not one of those half jokes wounded kids make because they want to tell the truth without being punished for sounding serious. I was 16. Late October. Rain tapping the kitchen windows. Chilly night. Tyler had brought 2 football friends over after practice, and my mother was practically glowing because boys were eating in her kitchen and praising her cornbread like she had won something. I had barely started eating when she slid a stack of bowls toward me. "Take these to the sink," she said, "and bring out more cheese." I looked at the bowls, then at Tyler, then at his friends already slouched and laughing and reaching for seconds. Why can't Tyler do it? The room changed shape around that sentence. Not with yelling. That would have been easier. With cold. My father set down his spoon. "Because your mother asked you." "But I'm eating too." My mother smiled that tight smile she used when she wanted my pain to look like immaturity. "Zoe, don't start." "Start what?" The attitude. That was her gift. She could turn my hurt into a flaw in my character before anyone had to face the thing that caused it. By the end of dinner, I was the disrespectful one. Tyler's friends stared into their bowls. Dad said peace in the house mattered more than proving a point. Mom said service was part of being a woman in a family. Then she handed me a dish towel like scripture had signed off on it. I stood there at the sink with cumin and bleach in my nose and swallowed tears so hard my throat hurt. Cold food teaches you things. It teaches you patience you never asked for. It teaches you how long a person can stay quiet when speaking makes everything worse. Mostly, it teaches you what people believe you can survive. I stopped asking for fairness because fairness kept getting translated into rebellion. If I said I was tired, I was dramatic. If I said Tyler should help, I was competitive. If I said I wanted to finish my meal, I was selfish. Every protest became proof that I lacked gratitude for all my parents did for me. My mother loved that phrase, "All we do for you." What they did for me looked a lot like chores, correction, and lowered expectations. What they did for Tyler looked like runway. When he turned 16, he got a used Honda Civic with only 80,000 miles on it. My father called it necessary because boys needed mobility for jobs and sports. When I turned 16, I got a lecture about responsibility and a bus pass tucked inside a Target birthday card. When Tyler drifted through community college classes and came up short on tuition, my parents covered the gap every semester because he just needed a little support. Yet when I got accepted to Ohio State's satellite campus and showed them my financial aid gap, my mother asked whether I had considered picking up more shifts. Dad told me, You've always been practical, Zoe. You'll figure it out. That sentence followed me for years. You'll figure it out. It sounds like praise. Sometimes it is just permission to abandon somebody politely. Tyler got support. I got confidence theater. By 19, I was working mornings at Starbucks, taking classes in the afternoon, and closing 3 nights a week at a home goods store off the interstate. Say, my car was a rust-specked Corolla I bought from my aunt's neighbor with cash I had saved in an envelope hidden in an old boot box, because my mother had a habit of borrowing small amounts when grocery money ran short and paying them back late if she paid them back at all. Tyler moved in and out of identities like weather: business certificate, personal training, real estate, e-commerce, landscaping, podcasting. Every version came with money from my parents and sympathy when it failed. He's finding himself, Mom would say. Young men need time, Dad would add. I was younger than Tyler and somehow already being treated like a woman whose life should make itself efficient for other people. I filled out FAFSA forms alone, waited in DMV lines alone, learned lease terms alone. Lease terms. I sat through a free budgeting seminar at the public library because I didn't understand APR and compound interest, and nobody at home had ever expected me to need a long-term plan beyond staying dependable. Dependable is a pretty word. People use it when they want the comfort of your labor without the weight of your humanity. When I was 22, I moved out. Not dramatically. No screaming match. No scene in the driveway. No, you'll regret this movie moment with boxes and tears and a slammed trunk. Just a third-floor apartment over a nail salon with beige carpet, thin walls, and a bathroom fan that sounded like a lawnmower. I had thrifted dishes, one wobbly table from Facebook Marketplace, a mattress on a metal frame, and blackout curtains from Walmart that smelled like plastic for 2 weeks. I ate ramen eggs, a deli rotisserie chicken, and whatever produce was cheapest that week. I tracked every dollar on a free app. I folded quarters for laundry into a jar by the sink. I kept my signed lease in a folder like it was a diploma. It felt better than any holiday I had ever had. No one told me to stand up. No one counted my bites. The first dinner I ate there was pasta with jarred sauce, slightly overdone garlic toast, and a salad kit I bought because it was on clearance. I sat at that tiny table by the window and kept waiting for someone to call me to the sink. Nobody did. I cried over boxed spaghetti, because freedom does not always arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it arrives in silence. My parents treated my move like a phase. Cute? Temporary. Mom called it your little place in the same tone people use for a child's lemonade stand. Dad asked whether I was saving enough to move somewhere safer, as if choosing independence on my budget made me reckless instead of determined. Tyler borrowed my folding dolly and forgot to return it for 6 months. Even after I moved out, the hierarchy followed me every time I visited. Sunday dinner still came with assumptions. Can you plate the rolls? Stay and help with the kitchen after. You're good at fitting the leftovers. Casual words. Casual can be a weapon. One Easter, I drove over after a 12-hour shift because Mom said family pictures mattered. I brought a bakery pie and a headache from fluorescent lights. I had been seated maybe 4 minutes before she asked me to refill the iced tea, then heat the ham glaze, then find the serving spoon for the scalloped potatoes. Tyler arrived late in mirrored sunglasses and a polo shirt, kissed Mom on the cheek, and sat down like a guest of honor. My father laughed with him over fantasy football. My pie sat unopened on the counter. I remember sitting in my car afterward with both hands on the steering wheel, making a promise to myself before I backed out of their driveway. I will never again confuse access with love. That promise saved me later. After college, I got an entry-level admin job at a property management firm downtown. The pay was not glamorous. The work was relentless. HOA complaints, lease renewals, maintenance logs, vendor calls, insurance notices, late fees, move-outs, water damage, noise disputes. People who believed the woman answering the phone controlled weather, plumbing, city code, and the emotional behavior of their neighbors. I learned fast because I had spent my whole life managing rooms that punished the wrong emotion. Within a year, I was the one nobody could rattle. Within 2, I was managing portfolios. Within 4, I moved into compliance and operations because rules made sense to me in a way family never had. Rules, at least on paper, could be read. I got licensed as a notary to help with document flow. I learned county filing timelines, deed transfers, probate notices, contractor lien procedures, lender correspondence, foreclosure mediation packets, and the exact tone people use when they are already lying before they finish sitting down. My supervisors trusted me with messes. My clients trusted me with details. I developed a reputation for being calm, while everyone else leaked panic. Calm is expensive. I built mine from scraps. I still worked too much, still drove used cars, still bought generic cereal, still compared insurance plans and utility rates and clipped digital coupons in line at Kroger. But my life started looking solid from the outside. I upgraded to a one-bedroom condo in a restored brick building with decent light, original trim, and a tiny balcony where I kept basil and rosemary in cheap Home Depot pots. I bought a real couch, a decent lamp, matching plates, a dining table. That table mattered more than it should have. Oak, smooth edge, enough room for 6. Nothing huge, nothing showy, just beautiful in a steady way. The first time I ran my hand along the edge of it after it was delivered, something in me went quiet. This one would be mine. This table would not turn me into staff. Which my parents reacted to my progress with the kind of praise that hides an old bruise. Zoe's always been independent. She doesn't need much. At gatherings, they introduced me like a summary. Our daughter Zoe works in property stuff, lives alone, very self-sufficient. Self-sufficient was another word they loved. It relieved them of history. They never said I became self-sufficient because nobody ever planned to catch me. They never said I understood filings, budgets, timelines, and legal notices because I had spent years teaching myself how not to drown. Tyler, meanwhile, stayed expensive. At 28, he was still cycling through opportunities dressed up as destiny. My parents helped with a condo down payment he swore he could handle. As my father co-signed on a truck because Tyler wanted to launch a premium landscaping and exterior design company. My mother paid his phone bill for a little while after a breakup. Then came Marissa. Then an engagement. Then a wedding my parents funded far beyond their means because appearances mattered, and Tyler's life had always been treated like the flagship project. My mother used retirement money for floral upgrades. I know because she called me to complain about prices while also asking if I could come early to set table numbers, steam linens, organize escort cards, and stay late to stack rental glassware. Hire more staff, I said. Why would I pay strangers when family can help? There it was again. Family when labor was needed. Extra when comfort arrived. I went. Not because I was weak. Because by then I understood there are fights that waste oxygen and fights that gather evidence. Tyler's wedding gave me evidence. I spent the morning pinning escort cards to a display board, while my mother fussed over centerpieces and my father wrote checks with the kind of face men wear when regret has not fully become shame yet. Tyler arrived late and keyed up, more concerned with whether the videographer had captured his entrance than whether the caterer had the extension cords they needed. When dinner started, he stood, clinked a glass, and thanked almost everyone in the room. Our parents, his groomsmen, Marissa's aunt who helped with flowers, the DJ, the venue coordinator, not me. Then my mother leaned toward my chair before I had finished half my salmon. The coffee station is low. Go check it. I looked at her. Reception lights reflected in the gold rim of her glass. My fork was still in my hand. I set it down carefully. No. She blinked. Small, rare. Excuse me? I said no. Across the table, Dad's jaw tightened. Tyler kept laughing at something one of his friends said. Mom lowered her voice. Not here. Exactly. I finished my meal, slowly. Not theatrically, not performatively, just slowly enough to make the point impossible to miss. It was the first time in my life my mother had to sit there and watch me keep my seat. I still think about that night because it wasn't my biggest act of defiance. It was my cleanest. A boundary does not need fireworks to burn. Years passed. I moved from operations into partnership. The owner of the firm, Denise, believed in brutal clarity, excellent shoes, and not rewarding panic. She began trusting me with acquisitions and distressed property transitions. I was the one reading files after midnight and spotting what other people missed. I understood negligence. I understood paper trails. I understood how mess grows under people who assume someone else will clean it up. Denise noticed. Then she compensated accordingly. By 30, I had equity, real money, real authority, real signatures that changed outcomes. I bought a townhome on the north side with a narrow front garden, a bright kitchen, and a dining room that made people stop when they walked in because sunlight hit the oak floors just right. I picked every chair myself. Cream upholstery, dark walnut legs, durable fabric because I wanted beauty that could survive actual life. I installed dimmers, hung framed black and white prints, and I bought linen napkins because I liked how they felt in my hands. I learned to roast chicken properly, make mashed potatoes from scratch, and bake dinner rolls that pulled apart with steam rising from the center. I built a table that would have held the younger version of me gently. That mattered more than most people would understand. My parents came over once for brunch after I moved in. Mom complimented the backsplash, then asked where I kept extra platters like she was doing an inventory check for a role she no longer held. Dad walked through the rooms with his hands behind his back like a cautious inspector. Tyler showed up 40 minutes late, complained about parking, and asked whether the guest room mattress was decent because he and Marissa might need a place sometime if things got weird with the condo. I did not say yes. I did not say no. I just smiled and poured coffee into my own mug first. The old system still tried to breathe any time they entered my space. My mother would hover near the stove and ask where she could help, but not in a way that offered help. In a way that reached for control. My father asked logistical questions designed to remind me he understood houses better, though half the time I knew more because I spent my days dealing with residential disputes, title problems, contractor failure, and people who signed things they never read. Tyler still acted like my stability was basically a spare room with his name waiting nearby. Then his life cracked open. Not all at once. First, the truck payments slipped. Then the landscaping business started bleeding out because Tyler mismanaged labor costs, ignored tax notices, and used business funds like a personal image budget. Marissa left after discovering hidden debt. The condo fell behind, credit cards stacked up, equipment financing got ugly. Then came a civil complaint from a client who claimed Tyler took a deposit, started work, and never finished. My father paid what he could. My mother refinanced things she had no business refinancing. Tyler promised a comeback with the same bright desperation he had been wearing for 15 years. A golden child does not fall softly. Too many people are underneath him. Around that same time, my father's company restructured. He kept a position, but the security got thinner and the benefits got worse. Then came my mother's knee surgery, more expensive than expected. Then rising insurance premiums. Then a home equity line they had opened years earlier, now partly for Tyler's wedding and partly for temporary help that never stopped being temporary. They were not ruined in one dramatic night. They were eroded. That is how a lot of families break. Quietly, repeatedly, one choice at a time. I found out how bad it was because my mother called me on a Tuesday at 8:17 p.m. while I was standing at my kitchen counter eating soup over the sink after a long day of emergency vendor calls and one impossible homeowner dispute involving a raccoon, a roof leak, and somebody threatening litigation over both. My mother almost never called that late unless she needed something. "Are you busy?" I'm eating. A pause. Not shame. Calculation. Can you call me when you're done? I could hear my father in the background saying something too low to catch. My spoon was warm in my hand. Then the soup smelled like rosemary and garlic. And for one strange private second, I noticed how foreign it felt to hear her ask me to finish eating first. I can talk now. Your father and I need some advice. Advice. That is the word people use when they want need to sound temporary. We agreed to meet that Saturday. At my house. I cooked because I wanted the setting clear. Roast chicken, real mashed potatoes, green beans with slivered almonds, warm rolls wrapped in a linen towel, sparkling water with lemon in a glass pitcher, candles, but not for drama, just because I liked them. My table looked calm, intentional, finished. They arrived 10 minutes early and sat in the living room while I was still in the kitchen, not scrambling, finishing. That difference mattered. But my father had aged in a way I had not fully seen in short holiday bursts. The skin around his eyes looked thinner. My mother's posture carried pain even when she stood still. Tyler was not with them. That was the first clue this was real. For years they had brought his chaos into rooms like a misunderstood child in need of patience. His absence meant they were no longer confident he could charm his way through his own consequences. I called them to the dining room when everything was on the table. Mom sat carefully, looking around in that assessing way she used to save for other women's homes. Dad folded his hands once, unfolded them, then reached for water. Nobody touched the food. They waited for me to sit. I noticed. I sat down last because I chose to, not because someone sent me to the stove. Oh, only then did I lift my fork. Mom opened her mouth to speak. I looked up. I'd like to eat while the food is warm. Her lips pressed together. Dad nodded once. Of course. So we ate. Not in total silence. In disciplined quiet. Knives against plates, the soft tear of bread. Ice settling in glasses. My mother looked like she kept rehearsing a sentence and losing courage halfway through it. My father chewed slower than usual. I took my time. No one told me to get up. No one slid a dish toward me. No one said the kitchen was waiting. When I finished my chicken and set down my fork, I dabbed my mouth with the napkin and leaned back. Okay, I said. What do you need? My mother looked at my father. He inhaled through his nose and answered in that tone men use when they want embarrassment to pass for restraint. We may need help organizing some things. What things? Your brother is in a bad spot. There it was. Never the center. Always the satellite around Tyler. I kept my face still. How bad? Then they told me more than they meant to. That is what pressure does. Missed mortgage payments on my parents' house, Tyler's civil complaint, an IRS payment plan he had ignored, credit card debt moved between family accounts, medical bills from mom's surgery, a lien threat tied to work Tyler had abandoned. 2 months of shuffling everything with retirement money, wishful thinking, and borrowed time. My father kept using words like bridge, temporary, setback, rearrange. My mother kept saying family. Then Dad slid a folder across the table. Inside were notices, statements, and one page from the county clerk's office. A foreclosure mediation filing. Their names, black print, official, real. I read everything slowly. Paper has its own kind of silence. When I looked up, my mother was watching my face in that old way, searching for leverage before language. We're not asking for charity. That line almost made me laugh. Need has a strange relationship with dignity. What are you asking for? Dad cleared his throat. A short-term loan, maybe? Some guidance with the property side? Maybe, if it comes to it, a place for your mother for a while after my brother in Indiana offered me contract work. Your mother, not us, already bargaining in pieces. Mom leaned forward. And Tyler just needs time to get back on his feet. I set the paper down carefully. Oh no, Tyler has been getting back on his feet since he was 19. My mother's face hardened on instinct. This is not the moment to keep score. That's interesting, I said, because score suddenly matters now that I'm the one with a table and a savings account. Dad flinched slightly. Zoe, Mom said. No, let's not rush past it. My voice stayed calm. That upset her more than shouting ever could. She knew how to punish emotion. Calm gave her nowhere to stand. You want money, you want strategy. You might want housing. You definitely want me to clean up a mess Tyler made. So before we talk about any of that, I need to be very clear about something. My father looked down. My mother held herself still. In this house, nobody gets ordered up from the table before they're done eating. So nobody is treated like staff because they're dependable. Nobody uses family as another word for service. The words landed quietly. That was the worst part for them. Gentle truth leaves no bruise to point at. Mom tried first. Of course she did. That's not what this is. It's exactly what this is. It's just the older version. Dad said, We came here because we trust you. You came here because I'm useful. His face changed. Not dramatically, just tired in a new place. I stood and carried my own plate to the kitchen. Not because I had to. Because I wanted them to sit with the sentence while I rinsed the plate under warm water. The faucet ran. The dining room stayed still. When I came back, they were in the same positions, somehow older and smaller inside my chairs than I had ever imagined them. I sat down again. Nah, I need you to hear what those dinners did. My mother lifted her chin. That old reflex. Not the chores, I said. The message. She said nothing. The message was that my hunger came last. My time came last. My place at the table came last. I was your daughter when there was work. I was an inconvenience when there was comfort. Tyler got to belong. I got to be helpful. We taught you responsibility. You taught me that if I asked for equal treatment, I'd be called difficult. Dad rubbed a hand over his mouth. You taught me that being useful was safer than being hurt. We did our best. Maybe, I said. But your best kept feeding one child and training the other to clear the plates. There are moments when memory stops being private. It gets up, walks into the room, sits down where everyone can see it. And I started naming them. The chilly night when I was 16 and got called disrespectful for wanting to finish eating. The Easter when Tyler arrived late and still sat first while I refilled drinks. The Thanksgiving when my plate got moved aside so the sink could get started. Tyler's wedding when Mom told me to check the coffee station before I had finished dinner. The bus pass. The FAFSA forms. The way Dad said I would figure it out while covering Tyler's tuition gaps like Hope had a preferred address. Mom denied the pattern first, then minimized it, then called it normal division of labor. Dad tried peacekeeping language. Then he stopped. He stared down at the grain of the wood under his fingers, and for the first time in my life, I watched him choose honesty over comfort. It wasn't normal, he said. But my mother turned toward him sharply. He did not look at her. I knew it wasn't fair. The room did not explode. It narrowed. Mom's eyes went glassy with anger or grief or both. Dad kept going. I kept telling myself it was easier if you helped because you always did. I told myself Tyler needed support more. I told myself your mother was stressed and you were strong and strong people can carry more. Then he looked at me. That was cowardly. I held his gaze. Some apologies arrive too late to repair anything. They can still tell the truth. My mother's hands were clasped so tightly her knuckles had gone pale. So what now? She asked. You punish us forever? No. I let that word sit. I don't need to punish you. Life already did some of that. Her face changed, just a flicker, shame maybe. Or fury that shame had found her at all. What happens now, I said, is structure. That word in my mouth made my whole career feel personal. Structure. The thing I built because chaos was never neutral. I gave them my terms. I would review every notice, debt summary, and property document. I would not give Tyler cash. I would not co-sign anything. I would not let him move into my house. If my parents needed short-term help, it would happen through formal agreements drafted and notarized, with full transparency and repayment terms where appropriate. If my mother ever needed to stay with me after a move or a medical issue, there would be rules. Respectful rules, adult rules, house rules written down if necessary, meals shared, not assigned, no commands, no guilt games. No old hierarchy sneaking in through familiar tones, no using my home as an annex of the order that broke me. Mom stared at me like I had become foreign. Maybe I had. Dad asked practical questions because practical questions are easier than sitting inside emotional debt. Then he said something that stayed with me. You built all this without us. Yes. No accusation. No softness. Just yes. Some facts should be allowed to stand upright. Over the next month, I became exactly what I had always been in that family. The one who handled what others dropped. Only now I did it on my terms. I met with a foreclosure prevention attorney I trusted through work. I reviewed Tyler's complaint exposure. I helped my parents organize statements, medical bills, lien warnings, insurance notices, and lender letters into labeled folders. I sat at my dining table with a yellow legal pad, a laptop, and copies spread under warm light while my mother watched me like she was seeing a language she had once dismissed become necessary. I found avoidable mistakes immediately. An unfiled hardship request, a late response to a mediation notice, duplicate subscriptions draining money every month, terrible refinancing terms, Tyler's endless pattern of partial truth. My father looked physically ill when the actual totals became visible. My mother cried once, only once, quietly, in the powder room off my hallway. Then she came back out with her lipstick fixed and her spine straight again. Pride survives on strange fuel. I did not rescue Tyler. That mattered. I helped my parents protect what could still be protected, but Tyler's consequences stayed his. When he finally showed up at my house unannounced one evening, smelling faintly of cologne and stale panic, asking if I could front him enough to clear the immediate issue, I stepped onto the porch and closed the door behind me. The sunset was catching in the windows across the street. My hydrangeas needed water. Somewhere nearby, a dog barked twice and stopped. Tyler gave me the smile he used when he thought charm still counted as money. Come on, Zoe. We're family. You only remember that word when invoices arrive. He laughed once like I was joking. Then he saw my face. Seriously. Very. You have money. I have boundaries. His expression sharpened. You always wanted to act better than us. That line might have worked on an older version of me, not that one. No, I said. I wanted to be treated like I belonged at the same table. He rolled his eyes. You're still doing the dinner thing? You mean the years of being told to get up while you stayed seated? He shrugged. Mom needed help. So did I. He had no answer for that. Only irritation. Only habit. When people have mistaken your endurance for natural supply, your limits feel rude to them. He left angry. Good. Anger was finally costing him something. My parents started coming over every other Sunday after that. Not because I invited them into sudden intimacy, because structure requires repetition. They arrived with documents, mail, questions, and sometimes takeout containers if I had cooked too much. At first, my mother still reached for old patterns. She would rise halfway from her chair when plates were done, and asking if she should clear things in a tone that sounded helpful, but was really just checking whether the old dance still existed. I always answered the same way. Leave it. We'll do it together after. Together, not invisibly me, not automatically me. My father adjusted faster. Guilt can make men teachable when pride fails. He started bringing organized notes. He thanked me for specifics. He asked before touching papers. Once, after I made pot roast with carrots and rosemary, he kept his hands folded in his lap until I sat down even though the food was steaming. My mother noticed. So did I. The title of your life can change without anybody announcing it. Sometimes it changes when people finally wait. Thanksgiving that year was the real test. My parents' house had been sold under pressure. And not lost in the ugliest possible way, but sold fast enough to avoid worse. They moved into a smaller rental duplex while sorting next steps. Tyler was living somewhere unstable and resentful, orbiting consequences and posting motivational quotes online like captions could repair credit. I hosted Thanksgiving. My house. My table. My rules. The morning smelled like sage, onions, butter, and pie crust. I wore a soft gray sweater and moved through my kitchen without hurry. Turkey under foil. Mac and cheese bubbling in a ceramic dish. Rolls under a towel. Candles low and gold. Outside, the November air had that dry, clean edge that makes every sound sharper. Inside, I could hear the timer, the hum of the refrigerator, the soft thud of cabinet doors closing under my own hand. Was my parents arrived with a grocery store pie and cranberry sauce they didn't need to bring, but probably needed to contribute. Dad complimented the place settings. Mom stood in the dining room doorway for a second, like memory had caught her by the sleeve. Then Tyler came. Late, of course. He looked older than his years in that specific way men do when their mirrors stop lying to them. He brought nothing, no wine, no flowers, no apology. I let him in because some reckonings are clearer in daylight. We sat. For a second nobody moved. Then my father looked at me. Are we waiting for you to start? The question landed deeper than he knew. Yes. So they did. The younger version of me would have broken open right there. The older one just picked up her fork. We ate warm food together, warm food. Yeah, it should not have felt revolutionary. It did. Halfway through the meal, Tyler reached for another roll and said, almost without thinking, Mom, can you get the butter? That old tone. The one that assumed women orbit convenience. My mother looked at him, then at me, then back at him. It's right beside you. That was all. Small, ordinary, massive. Tyler blinked and grabbed it himself. I do not believe people transform in one hard season. I do believe behavior can lose its audience. After dinner, nobody stood until I did. Then I said the words I had needed to hear my whole life. Leave the plates, we'll clear them together. My mother's face shifted. Not dramatic grief, not collapse. Something harder. Recognition, maybe, of the years she had made that sentence impossible. Later that night, after the leftovers were packed and my father was in the kitchen learning the way I like containers stacked, my mother found me alone in the dining room, blowing out candles. The room smelled faintly of wax, turkey, and cinnamon from the pie. I didn't think it mattered that much, she said. I turned toward her. She was standing with both hands wrapped around each other. No cardigan armor, no audience, just an older woman in my dining room finally admitting scale. It mattered every single time. Her eyes filled but did not spill. I thought I was teaching you to be strong. You were teaching me to accept less. She closed her eyes once. When she opened them, there was no defense ready. Not because she had become perfect, because she had run out of places to hide. I was harder on you because you listened. That line stayed in the room like smoke. There are confessions that do not redeem anything. They just identify the weapon. That wasn't love, I said. She nodded once. Barely. It was enough. She did not ask for forgiveness right there. I respected that more than tears. Some people cry as a shortcut. My mother had finally understood there was no shortcut in my house. Winter came. then spring. My father took contract work in Indiana for 6 months and commuted awkwardly. My mother stayed with me for a short stretch after a second knee procedure because the duplex stairs were hard on her. In the old version of our lives, that arrangement would have broken us. Instead, it became the most revealing month of all. I wrote practical house notes on a small card for the guest room nightstand. Wi-Fi code, alarm reminder, medication drawer, trash day, tea options, nothing parental, nothing submissive, just information. The first night she asked if I wanted help with cleanup. Yes, I said, you can dry. She did. Beside me, not behind me. One evening I came home late from the office with my shoulders aching from a contractor dispute and a probate issue involving an inherited duplex, 3 cousins, and 2 missing signatures. My phone was still buzzing from a vendor thread. When I opened the door, the kitchen smelled like chicken noodle soup and warm bread. My mother stepped away from the stove. "You're home," she said. "Sit down before it gets cold." I just stood there for a second, not because I was weak, because life is strange. Sometimes the thing you wanted most shows up after you no longer need it to survive. I sat. She served the soup. Then she sat too. No lecture. No debt attached. No request hidden under the kindness. Just soup. The honest part of me will tell you this. Revenge is not always fire. Sometimes it is watching the old order fail to reassemble. Sometimes it is hearing respect enter a room that once denied it oxygen. I did help my parents, within reason. Not because they were entitled to it, because I had finally learned help without surrender was possible. I negotiated with the lender, helped my father recalculate benefits and review retirement options, set up automatic payment systems my mother could actually maintain, found a manageable rental plan after the duplex lease, created distance where Tyler was concerned. And he got no access to my accounts, no spare key, no soft loopholes through my parents. He hated that. Too bad. A closed hand still deserves respect when it belongs to the person who built the house. About a year and a half after that first dinner at my table, my parents came over for Sunday supper again. By then, the pattern was set. They arrived on time. Dad brought flowers from the grocery store wrapped in that crinkly plastic that makes everything feel a little earnest. Mom texted first instead of assuming. Tyler was absent, somewhere managing the long, slow consequences of being loved without correction for too long. I made lemon herb chicken, roasted potatoes, salad with shaved parmesan, and a peach cobbler cooling by the window. The windows were open. Cicadas buzzed outside. The light in the dining room had gone honey soft. While my parents sat at the table and talked about ordinary things, the neighbor's new dog, gas prices, a show my mother had started watching, my father's knee, humidity. Nothing sharp, nothing strategic, just life. Ordinary can feel holy after years of humiliation. I was still slicing the chicken in the kitchen when I heard my father say quietly to my mother, "We'll wait. She hasn't sat down yet." I stopped for half a second with the knife in my hand. Then I finished plating, carried the dish in. Nobody rushed me. Nobody called me from another room. Nobody acted like my place at the table was conditional. I sat. My plate was hot. My food stayed hot. We ate together. That meal was not dramatic. No speeches, no tears, no cinematic collapse. It was better. It was proof. When dinner ended, but my mother reached for her plate, then paused. "Would you like to finish your tea first?" I looked at her. For one clear second, the old me rose in my mind. The girl with wet hands and cold potatoes. The girl whose chair was still warm when she got told to leave it. The girl who learned silence with a dish towel over her shoulder. The girl who thought maybe all daughters felt like temporary staff in their own homes. Then I looked at the woman I had become. The one who understood deeds, filings, signatures, repayment terms, and leverage. The one who survived without permission. The one whose table ran on respect. "Yes," I said. "I would." So they waited. Not stiffly. Not resentfully. just waited. My father leaned back in his chair. My mother folded her napkin. The kitchen stayed where it was. And the dishes stayed where they were. The evening stayed gentle. I finished my tea while it was still warm. There is no louder revenge than a rewritten routine. No sharper victory than being the one who decides when the meal is over. I used to think justice would feel explosive, like a slammed door, a perfect speech, a public reckoning sharp enough to leave a mark. It didn't. It felt like this: a quiet house, a steady hand, a hot plate, and two parents finally understanding that my time, my labor, and my presence were never theirs to command. That I was never the cleanup crew, never the convenient daughter, never the extra pair of hands orbiting everyone else's comfort. I was the person who built the only table in our family that knew how to hold people properly, and now they knew it too. If you've ever been the one who got told to wait, to help, to stay useful while everyone else stayed seated, then you probably already know this kind of hurt does not look dramatic from the outside. It looks normal. That is how it survives. That is how it gets defended. That is how a whole family can sit in the same room and call a wound tradition. So I want to ask you something. Have you ever had one small routine in your life that carried a much bigger message underneath it? Something other people brushed off. Something they called no big deal. But every time it happened, some part of you got pushed a little farther from your own place in the room. Because that was dinner for me. Not just dinner, a system, a lesson, a ranking. And then, eventually, a reversal. So if this story hit you somewhere real, you already know what I'm about to say. Like the video. Subscribe if you want more stories told exactly like this. And tell me in the comments what the moment was for you. The moment you realized it was never just about the plate. It was about who they believed had the right to stay seated.